Hello, and welcome to Stumbling Forward, a podcast about real people and the failures, spiritual awakenings, life changes, and lessons learned that shape them into who they are today. Hey folks, this is Erica, and before we start this episode of Stumbling Forward, I wanted to apologize that the quality of this one is not great. When we had finished recording, half of Sammy's audio and video did not get uploaded, so the podcast stopped, at least for him, right in the middle of the conversation. And the rest of it was just me talking to myself with no other video or no other response. So I had to go in and upload the backup of the entire conversation, but that backup version is not as clear or as of high quality. So there are some parts that just are not, they're not ideal. I just want to say that. But I still wanted to share this episode because Sammy is a quantum regression healer. And what he does is he will work with you to go back into your past timelines and past lives to help you heal the things that you might not even realize are broken. And I think it is a fascinating topic. I think it's something that could be really helpful for people. And I apologize for the quality of this particular episode. This is not what I want to share, but I don't also want to make Sammy re-record. So if you have questions, I will post his handles and his information in the show notes, and you can still get the general gist of the conversation, but it's just not the same quality that I would normally want to put out to you all. So thank you for listening. If you have questions, as always, reach out, but I'll talk to you soon. And today I have the opportunity to talk to Sammy Castro. Sammy, thank you so much for taking time to meet with. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
You're welcome. I'm Sammy Castro, and I'm originally from California. I moved to Ohio 2001. I work with people and helping them release imbalances, trauma experiences from within.
Awesome. That's so one, what took you from California to Ohio, first of all? That's a big jump.
My first ex-wife.
So you mentioned that you helped to go back to past lives and help heal some trauma. What exactly does that look like? So for people who have never heard of any of what you're talking about, can you explain a little bit more about what that looks like?
So from the person point of view, they're going to be following traumatic patterns, like say if somebody was abused, for example, when they're younger, or any point in time, they can follow that abusive pattern back to where it began within themselves, their own universe, and address those issues, those patterns, and emotions, and everything is entailed with that. And we bring a healed pattern back through to their present time.
Okay. And when you say go back and identify that pattern, is it just things that happen in this current lifetime, or do you also look at past lifetimes or things like that?
It's all lifetimes, all timelines, and all dimensions, all realities of that person's energetic signature.
Okay. So it might be something that they no idea what it is because it's not something that they remember or have experienced in this current lifetime. So like for me as Erica, this current timeline, it may be something that happened 3 lifetimes ago in a sense. Is still that impact is still happening. And so you're able to go back and find where it happened before to help me currently in this lifetime.
Exactly. So let's say if there's a family dynamic that's happening currently that you feel currently, there may be somewhere down in your family or your lineage. So it can go to 3, 4, 5 timelines, different realities, different versions of yourself and your family stuff.
Wow, that's fascinating. So how did you learn that you could do that? How did you stumble across this?
I found this out through my own shadow work. And my last relationship, she triggered it. She triggered my awakening and self-discovery and shadow work, and trying to figure out where I fit in this vast universe of everything. To myself, I said, I gotta get to the bottom of whatever this pattern is, because if it's going to repeat itself again, then what's the point in continuing on with, say, a relationship of any kind if that pattern's just going to keep repeating itself? Because it happened 3 other times. Happened with my last relationship before this one, and with my mother. So that's where my pattern began, was with my mother and the relationship dynamics between me and her. So she had created a pattern within herself and just transferred it over to me. So kind of like imprinted it, and like I inherited it. So I had to go back through that And this is what I was doing in shadow work. My shadow work was back through that and figuring out, okay, if that is even something I created for myself in my own timeline. And if it's not, then why is it there? Investigate, where it comes from, so you can follow it back. And then all the lessons that goes with it, and just letting go of a lot of imbalanced energy, and some of it's residual energies, and just a lot of stuff.
Yeah. So you mentioned that it was from your mom,
Yeah.
kind of your patterns stemmed from. When you went back to heal that, does that help her to heal you, or are you just going back and can you only control and impact like what's happening for you?
It depends if you have permission. If I had permission from her to address her thing, then that would be her timeline. But typically, when I'm working with an individual and their own universe, it's typically only there.
Okay.
And first, if the pattern comes in another person and they're alive, you're really not supposed to do anything with that because you're interfering with their karma.
Mhm.
You don't have permission. Now, if they're crossed over, that's something different because they're not living like physically living, and it's a different situation.
Okay. That's interesting. And that does make sense that you don't want to make decisions for people without their consent and their free
Yeah,
will to change anything. But I love that you were able to identify that you mentioned your relationship, that you said, okay, this happened here, it happened with my mom. So before I move forward and get into another type of relationship where this could happen, I need to do some healing to figure out how do I stop this pattern from showing up in my life. Have you found success in that? Have you been able to move to other relationships, even if they're not romantic, but have you had other relationships since then that you feel are more positive and more healthy because you've done that shadow work?
yeah. I have like a few real close friends that are in my town or close to me. Like, if I need somebody to absolutely talk to, I just can't figure something out, I can ask them for their perspective and their intuitive reasoning and things like that. Like, I have a friend who does QHHT, which is quantum hypnotic healing. They put you in a hypnotic trance or state, and they talk to you, have a conversation with your collective consciousness.
Wow.
I've had to utilize her because there are some places I couldn't get to.
Interesting.
So
Interesting. That's a whole new thing that I haven't until
yeah,
just now. It's another rabbit hole that I'll have to fall down to learn more about.
yeah. She put in a hypnotic state. So in my sessions, we're in a normal conversations. Um, so it happens in real time. It's a little different.
When you realized that you could do this, so you mentioned, you went through a breakup and then you kind of triggered your awakening. What did that look like for you? What was your, because I think everybody has a unique story for how they fell into their spiritual awakening. What did that look like for you? How did you know what it was and how to move forward with that?
I didn't really have anybody to uh, ask questions for them. I went to like meetups and there's like psychic developmental classes, and I found that I was only given half truth. So
Hmm.
went to one for 4 chakras, and then at the end of the class, I asked about protection and things like that. And the person goes, "Well, that's next week. That's another however many dollars. Oh, and by the way, you're here. I got all this stuff for sale." I'm like,
Right,
it just didn't seem right to me. If you're going to give people information, you give them all of it, or you don't give them none of it, because
right.
you're only giving that person enough information to protect themselves or to have full knowledge. So I decided that if I was going to do this, I was going to give people, I was going to give that person full knowledge, all the tools to do the work for themselves.
And I think that some parts of society, we'll say some parts, are more open to this type of conversation and are very into, the different aspects of spirituality. And so when you were starting, so you had a disadvantage because you were really limited on where you could get information. And now I feel like people have maybe a more advantage because there's so much out there. But now the challenge and the disadvantage is how much of it is accurate and real, and how much of it is people trying to make a buck, trying to sell it because this is kind of a hot topic and it's starting to really pick up. So how much of this is people riding the wave to make an income off of selling half truths and partial information?
Yeah. So during my awakening and the beginning of it, my whole process or my whole idea behind that was to find as much as I could find out about myself, all the information I could find out about myself. And I even took classes and workshops and all this stuff and learned a technique where I can work in somebody's quantum field. Quantum touch is what I learned. And then quantum regression kind of adapted from that, because quantum touch was working with the physical part of the individual. And I found it easier. I can work outside of that physical individual and just work in their energetic field and have just as much, if not more, positive results.
Interesting. So the quantum regression is what you're doing now, which is where you go back down the lines to look at what happened and heal that past self and bring it to the current. Is that what
Yeah.
quantum regression is? Okay.
So we regress through the quantum field to a previous state of being. And so when we go back to those previous states of being, we're going there as an observer, and we don't change anything because it could alter the present time of that individual. So all the things they learned previous to that could be altered in some way.
Okay. Like you don't go back
Yeah,
and stop the abuse. The abuse happens, but you heal that person so they don't carry the wounds and the damage that it caused forward. They come forward healed. So everything still happens the way it's supposed to, but the version of themselves experiencing is a healed version. Is that
yeah,
a summary?
and they have the knowledge of why it happened and all the lessons and everything that they may have missed or wasn't allowed to see at that point in time when that event happened.
Okay.
And then when we go back, when that person goes back, then we ask questions and we make sure that they're aware of everything that they feel during and afterward. Because if they're not aware, if a person's not aware, there's might as well just stick a band-aid over it. The whole point of regressing back to your previous state of being is to repair things that person wasn't available to repair at that point in time.
Right. And so this is something that has come up, and I've talked about it with other folks on past episodes. And again, not for toxic positivity sake, but things happen for a reason. And so we sign up contracts with people before we come to this timeline, and the abuse is supposed to happen for whatever reason. It's supposed to happen. It from a human level, yes, it's sad and it sucks that it does, but there's a lesson that we're supposed to learn. And so you're going back to help them learn that lesson because in that moment, maybe their human self, which has forgotten these contracts and these agreements, is more physically wounded from that event. So they're not looking at it from like a cosmic standpoint, but from a personal human standpoint, which is I was abused, I'm hurt. And then they carry that wound forward. So you're going back to help them see the purpose in why that happened and what
Yeah,
that was supposed to teach that. So you're helping them to tie the big picture together in ways that they wouldn't be able to see without maybe your assistance.
yeah. So when a traumatic event happens in a person's life, they're not emotionally or physically capable of seeing, oh, what was the lesson in that? Or why did that happen? The humans and survival skills take over and all of the other stuff. And say when someone's abusing us, we don't really stop and say, hey, why are you abusing me? What are the lessons in this abuse? Why does it have to happen right now? You're not really thinking about that. You're thinking about escaping. And yeah, you just want to leave that behind. And then over time, the the body and our energy just stores it in a place for later revisit or karma or something like that.
So if you don't heal it, so if you have this abuse early on and you don't ever take the time to heal from it, is that one of those wounds that you take to the next life and the next life and the next life until you heal it and learn the lesson from it? Is that why we carry things to the next life
Yeah,
essentially is because we're not healing or learning the lesson of why it happened. So
that
therefore if we shut it down, we keep carrying it until we actually face it.
yeah, that or it also manifests physically. So if a person is abused and they never address issues like say go to counseling, for example, just talk to friends or somebody like that to release those patterns or those emotions related to that, then the person's quantum field attracts that same vibration. And then over time, if that's not addressed, they physically feel it. They manifest physically within themselves. So, like say people who have lost a loved one, pet, or something like that, and they don't deal with that grief, it can cause heart issues.
Wow. Wow. I have a lot of thoughts. So when you started doing this, so I've run into a lot of skeptics who they typically dismiss it or make fun of it or a little bit judgmental. But have you worked with anybody that maybe was a skeptic that you could not help because of their limiting beliefs in it, or typically the people that are coming to you for help, they're already open and able to work with you?
Yeah, they're usually somebody who's never had a spiritual experience with a healer. Say if somebody comes to me, they've already exhausted pretty much everything that they thought they can do. And then some people also have been in, like, say, uh, therapy, like with a psychiatrist or a therapist or something like that. And then some they just want something else other than that. But
Okay.
usually people that absolutely don't believe or think we're working with devils or something like that, they just usually say what they got to say and they usually just leave.
Well, when I first kind of got into all of this, the door for me was animal communication. And
Mm-hmm.
people who didn't believe in it were like, yeah, that's really that sure, you're just making it up. But then there were some people, they would challenge you to, prove it. Like what's their favorite toy? What's their favorite something that
Mm-hmm.
only they would know, and they would challenge it. So have you had anybody that was me, I don't believe what you're doing. I think it's all a crock, but tell me something that happened in my life. Has anybody ever kind of
I
challenged you
think
to prove
I
it?
think yeah, the one that was biggest hindrance would be my last relationship. It
Oh,
was,
really?
yeah, every time I was doing something, it was some negative whatever. Even after she moved out, and she'd come by the house we was living in before I moved out. She'd come by there and she'd say I'd have crystals or something sitting out. She goes, "Are you still playing with that stuff? You haven't grown up or anything?" Stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so it got so bad, I just had to move away. I just had to leave because I couldn't live in that house anymore. The toxicity was so in everything that I was moving. It's different city.
It's tough because if you're trying to be on a certain vibration, that negative energy, even if you try to stay positive, like it does bring you down because it's just constantly wearing at you to be in that negative environment. So that makes sense that you needed to step aside from that. So when you are working with folks, just to maybe give a little bit of context, and this was something that was new for me. I hadn't really heard of what you do until you and I chatted about it. I feel like you and I are working together. I'm a client. Like, what does this typically look like, and what for you, what are you seeing when you talk about their quantum field? If you could maybe explain it a little bit more, like what does that look like and what are you noticing when you see this?
So on the other side of sessions, what I see after we ground, we connect to the Earth energy, and we connect to whatever source energy you believe in, whatever higher power you believe in. You're grounded and you're connected to space. No matter where you're going, nothing can pull you out of center. So what it looks like to me is I can see your divine blueprint.
Okay.
So I can see all your geometric patterns. I can see where you hold certain imbalances, where your triggers are, how far back it goes, where it goes. And seeing all that, I would have you, if we're doing it for you, if we're doing a session, you would have full control of that. So you can go wherever you wanted to go in order to release that pattern.
Interesting. Okay. And so when you see it, so you're able to see the whole blueprint and you can say, here's where things happened, here's where wounds are and things you might need to address. Do you tell them the things that you're seeing? If like, again, if they don't know, so if it's you and me working together and maybe something happened that I don't know why this is the way it is, do you tell them here are things I'm seeing? What do you want to work on? Or do you ask them to direct you? Because I guess my question
Yeah.
is if they don't know, how do they know where to guide you to help them?
Yeah, I'll give them guidance and things like that. Say if you're going through your family line and there's something that you pass by that's important, and I'm saying I get information and say, oh, well, you need to pay attention to this. We say, what about this right here? Bring your awareness to that area.
Okay. And are you typically able to, I guess, maybe heal in one session, or does this typically require multiple sessions to work through, or is it kind of depending on the amount of healing that they need to do?
It depends on that person. So
Yeah.
like, if you're able to go and do multiple layers of one aspect of an imbalance, like because it spider webs out, it like connects to different timelines and different realities. The one day abuse in your family line could go 3, 4, 5 different past lives to different realities to connect to. Say if it's a father figure that's an abusive person, you can into that father's timeline and then you can go that way too.
Interesting.
So it all depends on how far that person is allowed to go back and how far they're willing to go back.
Okay. And when you say allowed, is that partially based on divine time? Maybe right now you're
Yeah,
not ready to go back to that point because you haven't developed the skills you might need to cope with that. So that's something that is off limits for now, but maybe 6 months from now, like you would be able to go.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So if their guide and tell that person, you're not at the right point in your journey to address that. I don't tell somebody to only go back till you think you can. I say go back to the point where it originates. Because if I tell somebody only go back to where you think you can, then they're going to go back to the point where it's uncomfortable. I stop.
Right. Because
But
discomfort, nobody wants to be uncomfortable, but kind of have to
yeah,
face it to get through it.
yeah. So typically, a person when they get to a sensitive area, they can usually go a little bit farther. I'll ask them if they say they got to this spot. I said, can you go further? Can you go further back? And generally, they will try. And, yeah, I can go this much further.
When you were talking about like family history or, a history of abuse, have you ever done group or family sessions where it's both parents were abusive and then the child is or now an adult and they talk about this and say, hey, yeah, let's fix this. Are you able to do it with two or more people if they said, let's go back and heal what we did that is making us do this now? Or is it usually just one at a time?
I have not done family members per se, but I've done groups of 15 or so people. And if those people, if they're comfortable with each other, they will share personal stuff, and then I can get personal information. Otherwise, I don't generally get personal information in a big group that they're not comfortable with each other because who
Oh, it's
wants
very
to?
fair. Yeah.
Yeah, who wants to show themselves their wounds to people they don't know?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's why when you said 15 to 20, I was like, wow, that's impressive because I
Yeah,
can't imagine wanting to really go into your history in a big setting. But I thought maybe in a family setting, that let's all get together and let's just nip this in the bud now.
yeah. If everybody in that party is willing to do that,
Okay.
not everybody is willing to bare their wounds, so to speak, and say, "Oh yeah," because some people feel like you're picking on them or you're just digging around, stuff like that.
Right. Yeah, or pointing finger. Hey, you did this to me, even though from a spiritual standpoint, there was a reason why, but let's fix this and address this. But they might, from a human level, feel like you're attacking them for these things, and I don't want to air our family's dirty laundry in front of Sammy, this nice stranger
Yeah,
that we just met who I can understand that. But man, that would be so helpful. Like a therapy type of standpoint to get everybody together and not just go to therapy and talk about it. Like let's really go back and heal it so that we can be in a better place. Like, that would be so helpful for
yeah.
groups to do that.
Even if you can get the family in, say, a group, but maybe not have them all in the same place. Like maybe have the child one time and then the mother one time and the father another time.
Yeah, that would be amazing. But again, getting everybody to be on board with it and it's hard, I think, even just going to therapy to have people talk about things, let alone really doing that deep look.
Yeah,
But that's man, that's a powerful gift, Sammy. That's a really powerful gift. You've been doing this in different kind of facets for the last 15 years. What do you want people to know about what it is that you do, or if they have, maybe if they're starting to have a spiritual awakening, do you have any guidance for folks now? Do you have any guidance on how people can learn the information that they would need to better understand what's happening to them?
I would tell people to, for one, take your time to learn your language that you speak between you and your reality. I did it fast, but there's a lot of things that so I hyper focused on all of this, and there's a lot of things that otherwise I would have been able to enjoy, like being in the present moment. So something simple like going to the movies. When you're hyper focused on healing your shadows and all that stuff, you're not thinking about going out and having fun. You're thinking about what's ahead, what's next.
When you
Yeah,
say your language, what are you talking about? Like the different clairs, like the clairvoyance, if it's seeing, if it's hearing, if it's feeling, is that what you're talking about, or is there something different?
it's a vibrational language that you speak to your reality. So when you see signs, or some people see numbers, some people hear different things, some people get messages through music, their dreams. Everything speaks in a certain logic, that we can understand. So me, I see things logically and geometrically. So I see synchronicities, not so much emotional, but there are people that speak, say, in different patterns and things like that.
So if the universe or your spirit team is giving you signs, learn how all those are communicating. So if you're having really vivid dreams that seem like, wow, that was a message or a visit from somebody that maybe has
Yeah,
passed, that might be an actual communication with your energy and your spirit team. And if your synchronicity is times on clock like 555s and 111, stuff like that,
yeah,
if you're noticing things, and what you mentioned to me the other day was notice when they're showing up. So it's one thing to notice that they're happening, but what are you doing? What are you thinking about when you're seeing it? Because that might be part of the message too.
yeah. If something happens, like if you're getting like a sensation, say your head tingles and you
Hmm.
at a specific time in the day, why does it happen at a specific time of the day? What either are you thinking about, or what's where are you at in your environment?
Okay. No, I think that's really helpful because one of the things that I struggled with a little bit when I first started becoming more awake and aware was I was getting signs and messages, but I didn't really know how to interpret them because I was expecting them to be more like human interaction, which is
Hmm.
words and just like, hey, Sammy, don't do this thing, or hey, do this thing. And it wasn't like that. It was, it was more you have to decipher it and interpret things. And so I think, brushing off a lot of communication that was happening as I just thought, like, what a weird coincidence, or it was a random thought versus identifying it for what it was.
Yeah. And what I did is I always questioned everything. If a thought came in, I always questioned it. Why is that thought here? Where did it come from? What is it trying to tell me? Things like that.
Okay. Yeah, that's the part that I was not doing. I would have thoughts, but I always have a lot of thoughts. And so I just thought my brain was rapid firing different things. But then somebody said, well, like you did, why did I have that thought? Why was that the thing that popped in my head? And is it coming from me or is it coming from something else? Because that was something I just wasn't interpreting correctly. So if you're somebody who already lives in your head, you may be very quick to dismiss things that are actually signs or
Yeah.
messages.
Yeah. And you can talk to those thoughts. You can ask if you get a thought, say driving down the road, going home from work, and a random thought pops in your head. You ask, "Oh, is that mine?" And you'll get an answer. If it's not, say, "Well, then go back where you came from." I mean,
Yeah.
when I was telling people this, when I first was learning this for myself, people were like, oh, that sounds crazy. I was like, well, it's really not crazy. If you really think about it, people say, you always talk to yourself. Well, I always talk to myself because why not? uh, that's my therapy, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, if it's a good company, why not? But
Yeah.
also sometimes it's not you. Sometimes it might be something else, someone else.
Yeah.
So it's just, is this me or is this not me? So no judgment there.
And then if it's not your team or your spirit guides, it won't sound and it won't feel the same. It won't feel like you.
Okay. That's good to know. Oh, so that's a question I have, if you don't mind. How do people know who and what might be their spirit team? And also, when you are connecting with all of that and with them, are you able to see their spirit team? So when you're getting in their quantum field, can you see who their spirit team are?
Sometimes I can. It all depends on if they have information or a message for them. And a lot of times it is like a family member that's passed on or crossed over, or like, say, a pet sometimes. But it's generally a person that they have had an emotional relationship with, like a parent, a grandfather, a sibling, somebody that they're emotionally attached to. And then sometimes they come through.
So yeah, I noticed when I've talked to people who are very connected with their guides, sometimes it's family and sometimes it's something totally random. It's someone that they don't know, and sometimes it's not always human as well. And so that's something that I think is a very different concept for folks who might be newer to this. One, that you have a guide team, a spirit team, but two, what all that can consist of. Because again, that's something I'm not quite as adept with yet and haven't really figured out my team. I think I know a couple of, but I don't know all of them. And so I think that's something that might be a new concept for people.
If somebody wants to communicate with their spirit team, the easiest way is to meditate, because it's when your physical mind is shut down, and your consciousness is open, so
Okay.
you can communicate with your spirit guides. I have something coming up where I can help people and contact their spirit team.
Oh, nice.
So it's something I learned when I was first starting to be in contact with my spirit team, and I don't have any family members that are in mine at all.
Okay.
I have Metatron is one, and Tesla, Nikola Tesla comes in.
Very cool.
Mhm.
Very neat. Yeah, I think that's a really cool tool. You said it's something that's coming. I think that would be great because even for me, I will definitely be following up because I would love to be able to know who they are and communicate with them more effectively. And so that's something I think would be really helpful. So I want to be aware of time and be respectful because I know it's the evening time. But if people want to work with you, if they're thinking and listening to this and saying, "Wow, this is really fascinating," or "Man, I've got some stuff to heal," how do they get in touch with you to set up a time to chat and learn a little bit more?
Easiest place is through Instagram or Threads right now.
Okay.
I'm not usually on Facebook, but you can find me on Facebook, and you can use Facebook Messenger
Okay.
that way. Um, those are the easiest way.
Okay. So I'll make sure to put your handles in the show
Mhm.
notes. That way people can get in touch with you because I know that you're definitely more active on Instagram and Threads. And then any final thoughts? So anything that you want people to hear, to take away, to know about you or your services or just in general today?
I just say be kind to yourself. You've done this before many, many times, and you're still here. So just be kind to yourself. Take care of yourself.
That's
Ask questions.
yeah. Ask questions. And I think that knowing people like you and if there are other resources that you would recommend, I think that would be helpful as well because there's just a lot out there and it's hard to know what's real and what's not and what to trust and what not to
Yeah.
trust. So that I think is maybe a concern some folks have is just where do I go to learn and who do I ask and feel like
Yeah.
I'm getting the correct information?
So many people try to follow another person's personal blueprint. So I would never recommend somebody follow my path word for word because
Mm,
it won't work. So like my path will not work for you because
right.
my journey is my language. Your journey is your language. But we can work together, and I can give you some tools that I've learned that you can adapt and use in your own way.
Okay. That's awesome. That makes sense too. Your story and your journey is yours. So excellent. Well, Sammy, thank you so much. This was really fascinating stuff. I could talk to you for hours and ask you a million questions, but I won't do that to you, at least not today. So thank you for your time, and I will put your information in the show notes. If anyone has questions, they'll reach out to you.
Sure. Appreciate
Thank
that.
you. And then everybody else, thank you so much for listening to Stumbling Forward, and we'll catch you on the next time.